Oh, sorry about that. Here. Should cover the dry cleaning.
The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday morning. Derek Ellison stepped out of his black SUV in front of his corporate headquarters, buttoning his jacket, already talking loudly on his phone. Reporters were waiting. Cameras were rolling. He had 48 hours before he signed the biggest contract of his life, $20 billion, and he wanted the world to see exactly who he was. He looked expensive. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. And then he saw her, walking along the sidewalk, head down, carrying a folder of documents, trying to step around the puddles collecting along the curb. Danielle, his ex-wife, the woman he divorced 5 years ago and hadn't thought about once since. He didn't slow down. He actually smiled. And then he pressed the accelerator. The front wheel of his SUV hit the puddle at full speed. A wall of dirty brown water exploded off the street and crashed directly into Danielle, soaking her from her hair down to her shoes. The documents flew from her hands. Her bag hit the ground. Her cream blazer was covered in mud. She stood completely still. The executives around Derek started laughing. His new girlfriend, standing near the entrance, covered her mouth, but she was laughing too. Derek rolled down his window and said, "Oh, sorry about that. Here." He pulled out a few folded bills and held them through the window. "Should cover the dry cleaning." More laughter. Danielle did not move. She slowly reached up, wiped the mud from her face with the back of her hand, and looked directly at him. No tears, no raised voice. She said quietly, "One day, Derek, you'll wish you had chosen kindness." Then she picked up her documents, turned around, and walked away. Derek watched her go for 2 seconds. Then he shrugged, rolled up his window, and kept moving. He had a $20 billion deal to close. What did she matter? He had absolutely no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of those boardroom doors. Welcome to Morel Folktales, the place where the stories that need to be told finally get told. If you are new here, subscribe right now, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. We want to hear from every single one of you. Now, let's go back to Danielle. Let's stay in that moment just a little longer. Because what happened on that sidewalk wasn't just embarrassing. It was the kind of thing that reaches inside a person and touches something very deep. Danielle hadn't seen it coming. 1 second she was walking, focused, mentally preparing for her charity meeting. The next second the world went cold and dark and loud all at once. The cold hit her instantly. The smell, street water, oil, exhaust, filled her nose. She felt mud on her eyelashes, on her lips, on her collar, and she heard the laughter before her vision even cleared. Not one person, multiple voices, some uncertain at first, then growing louder when they realized it was safe to join in. Then she heard Derek's voice, that familiar voice, the one she used to trust more than her own. "Here, should cover the dry cleaning." She looked at the bills in his outstretched hand. That was the hardest part. Not the water, not the cold, not even the laughter. It was the casualness of those bills, the complete absence of weight in the gesture. The way he held them out like she was a minor inconvenience being managed, like she was nothing. Something happened inside her in that moment. Not anger. Anger would have been easier. Something more like a door closing, very quietly, and locking from the inside. She breathed. She wiped her face. She looked at him and said what she said. Then she walked. Half a block down, she turned into a coffee shop doorway where no one could see her clearly. She put her palm flat against the cold wall. She closed her eyes. 5 seconds, maybe 10. Then she straightened her back, fixed what she could on her blazer, and called her assistant. "Are you okay?" her assistant asked. A pause. "I'm completely fine," Danielle said. She meant it. To understand who Danielle Cole is now, you have to go back to who she was at 26. She was a structural engineer, first in her family to finish university, on full academic scholarship, working part-time, and sending money home every month without fail. She was not soft. She was not naive. But she was in love. Derek was 31 when they met. He was building his construction company from nothing, working hours that would have broken most people, talking about the future with an energy that was genuinely magnetic. She believed in him completely. When his company was struggling in those first 2 years, when contracts weren't coming in and confidence was draining, it was Danielle who sat with him at the kitchen table at midnight and went through government contract proposals line by line. She knew what the reviewers needed. She knew how to make the engineering case when they won. She never asked for acknowledgement. He never offered it. And the company grew. As it grew, Derek changed. Gradually. The way seasons change, you don't notice the exact moment. Only that something is different now. He stopped asking her to review proposals. He started attending events without her. At dinners with his executive team, he began introducing her as less, by degrees. First, my wife Danielle, she's an engineer, then just my wife, then sometimes not at all. She would stand at those tables, surrounded by people being introduced by name, and feel herself becoming invisible inside a room she was physically present in. One night at dinner, Derek laughed and told his colleagues, "Danielle once thought I should sell the company in year 2. Can you imagine?" She had never said that. Not once. But she sat with her wine glass and her smile and said nothing. She asked him once, directly and calmly, "Are we okay?" He looked up from his laptop. "Why would you ask something like that?" Not yes. Not no. A question designed to make her question feel unreasonable. Then she found the messages. She wasn't looking for them. She picked up his phone to set an alarm. The screen was already open. She saw a name she didn't recognize and 3 words in the preview. "Thinking about tonight." She put the phone down very slowly. She sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there and felt something in her chest go very quiet, like a sound that had been playing for years suddenly stopping. She waited 2 weeks. She watched. She learned more than she ever wanted to know. His assistant. Over a year. Half their social circle knew. Some of her own friends knew. Nobody had said a word to her. When she confronted him, he didn't apologize. He got cold and controlled and told her she had been emotionally unavailable, that she was always in her own head, that a man in his position needed to feel supported. She sat across from him and thought about every midnight at that kitchen table, every dinner where she had smiled through being erased, every time she had made herself smaller so he could appear bigger. She said nothing. She called a lawyer the next morning. He expected her to fight, to demand recognition of everything she had contributed. She didn't. She took what was cleanly hers, signed the papers, and left. He told people they had simply grown apart. He actually believed she would fall apart. Danielle moved to another city, and she started over. She went back to what she knew, engineering, this time on her own terms. She began consulting for humanitarian infrastructure projects, water systems for underserved communities, structural development in areas that needed it. She worked in 3 different countries in 18 months. She didn't document it for social media. She just worked. And it was during this period, at a small project review in Cape Town, that a quiet man in the back of the room asked 2 questions that stopped her mid-sentence. Not because they were difficult, because they were exactly right. Because whoever this man was, he had actually read everything she'd shared and actually understood it. He left before she could reach him. His assistant emailed the next morning. She almost said no to the meeting. She went anyway. Adrian Kingston arrived on time, sat down, and opened a physical notebook, his own handwriting, with notes about her work in Kenya. She walked out of that meeting with one thought she couldn't shake. This man was different. They met again, and again. Within 2 years, without either of them announcing it, they had built something she had stopped believing she would ever have again. He proposed quietly. No audience. She said yes. They agreed to keep it private until after one final business deal he was managing, a large infrastructure contract he'd been building toward for months. Once it was signed, they'd tell people. The deal was $20 billion. The construction firm he had selected as his primary partner? Derek Ellison's company. If you are still watching at this point, we see you. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and what you think Danielle is about to do. The comments are moving, and we want your prediction before this story hits its peak. When Danielle got back to her hotel room that afternoon, after changing her ruined blazer and running her charity meeting without missing a beat, she called Adrian. She told him everything. The car, the puddle, the laughter, the bills through the window. He was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? Yes. How do you want to handle tomorrow? Not. I'll pull the contract. Not. Leave it to me. He asked her, because he understood, without her having to explain it, that this was hers. I want to walk into that room, she said, and let him see me. That's all. Then that's what we'll do, Adrian said. She sat with that for a while. She thought about the fact that she hadn't designed this, hadn't planned it, hadn't spent a single day of the last 5 years building toward a return. She had simply decided to be excellent. And without any engineering of her own, life had placed her at the exact center of the one thing Derek needed most. She opened her laptop, reviewed the project files, read Derek's structural proposals page by page. The technical work was sound. His team was capable. But Adrian's standard had never been only technical. Tomorrow would answer the only question that remained. She closed the laptop. She called her sister. She fell asleep watching something she wouldn't remember. She slept completely well. Of everything that happened across those 48 hours, that detail says the most. Derek arrived at the signing venue feeling like the best version of himself. Navy suit, silver tie, the watch. He worked the lobby effortlessly. Right handshake for each person, right eye contact, the calibrated confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in a room. He was shown to the boardroom. His team arranged themselves around him. The chairs across the table were empty. 9 a.m. The door opened. 3 Kingston advisors walked in first. Then Adrian Kingston, tall, composed, simply dressed in the way of someone with nothing left to prove. Derek rose immediately, hand extended, smile ready. And then the door opened slightly wider. His hand stayed where it was. His brain did not immediately process what his eyes were showing him. Because the woman walking in beside Adrian Kingston, cream blazer, leather portfolio, posture straight, not a single thing out of place, was the same woman he had watched walk away through street mud 24 hours ago. Danielle. She crossed to the table and sat directly across from Derek. She looked at him, once, directly, long enough to make clear that she saw him completely. Then she opened her portfolio. And she did not look at him again. Adrian sat, looked around the table once, then spoke. Good morning. I'm Adrian Kingston. The woman beside me is Danielle Cole, my fiancée and chief strategic advisor on this project. Her assessment carries equal weight to mine in every decision we make today. He paused. Any questions before we begin? No one spoke. Derek slowly lowered himself back into his chair. The first part of the meeting was procedural. Financials, timelines, delivery frameworks. Derek's team presented well. Derek barely spoke. He was watching Danielle. She was taking notes with the focused attention of someone doing actual work. She hadn't looked at him once. Then she spoke. Page 47. The load-bearing projections for the coastal segment. Can someone walk me through the tolerance margins? Derek's VP of operations turned to the page. Of course, the margin we applied. It's undercalculated, Danielle said. Flat. Factual. By about 12%. For infrastructure at this scale in a coastal environment, it won't perform optimally over 20 years. Not a safety violation, but it will underperform. Silence. Derek's senior engineer said quietly, she's right. We flagged it internally. It didn't make the final document. Derek looked at him. The engineer did not look back. Danielle made a note and moved on. During the break, Derek crossed the room toward her. She was standing alone, reviewing her phone. Danielle. She looked up. I need you to know. Yesterday, I didn't know it was you. I know, she said. So you know it wasn't personal. She was quiet for a moment. Derek, she said, the fact that you didn't know it was me is exactly the problem. You did that to a person. It didn't matter who she was. She walked back to the table. Derek stood at the wall. He had nothing. The second half of the meeting was where everything became real. Adrian Kingston set his pen down on the table with quiet deliberateness. The room noticed. He looked at Derek. Only at Derek. Mr. Ellison, your company's capability is not the question in this room. It never was. Your team is skilled, the financials hold, the project capacity is there. He paused. What I need to understand before anything is signed today is something that will not appear in any document on this table. The room was completely still. Character. Derek said, I understand. Yesterday morning, Adrian said, my fiancée was walking near your headquarters in the rain. A vehicle came out of your building's entrance. The driver saw the puddle. The driver saw her. And the driver chose to accelerate. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just clear. She was soaked with dirty water in front of a crowd that laughed. The driver offered her money for dry cleaning and drove away. Derek's CFO was staring at the table. His VP of operations had her hands flat in front of her. His senior engineer was looking at the wall. Nobody moved. The driver, Adrian said, was you. Adrian, I had no. I know you didn't know who she was, Adrian said. She told me. And I want to be clear, I don't make business decisions based on personal incidents. He let that sit. But every long-term relationship I have built has one foundation. Not capability, not reputation. What a person does when they believe the other person has nothing left to offer them. That is the only moment that shows what someone actually is. Everything else can be performed. He turned to his left. Danielle, your full assessment. Now, for the first time since the meeting resumed, Danielle looked up and looked at Derek. She held his gaze. The room held its breath. She opened her portfolio, looked at her notes, looked back at him. The company qualifies, she said. Technically, structurally, financially. Derek's team will perform well if the coastal segment is corrected before groundbreaking. She paused. I don't believe that what happened to me yesterday should determine the fate of a project that will employ thousands of people. If the work is right, the work should stand. Another pause. Longer. But I think there is something this room requires before anything is signed. Not for me. Not to satisfy anything I need. Simply because it is what a person of genuine integrity does when they have caused harm, regardless of what they stand to lose. She looked at Derek, and she waited. Derek looked around the table. His CFO, his VP, his engineer, his legal team. Nobody would look at him. He was completely alone at a table full of his own people. He looked at Danielle. I'm sorry, he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Not just for yesterday. For a lot of things. For a long time. He stopped. Breathed. I told myself a story after the divorce. That we had grown apart. That I had outgrown you. It was a cleaner story than the truth. The truth is you were the only person actually in my corner when it mattered. You sat with me at that table, and you built things with me that I took full credit for, and I treated that like it was nothing. He looked directly at her. I'm sorry, Danielle. I genuinely am. The room held the silence. Danielle looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just acknowledgement that the words existed, that they were real, and that they could not undo anything but they were finally true. Adrian picked up his pen. Shall we talk about finalizing the terms? The contract was signed at 3:47 p.m. with 3 additional clauses, a formal ethics framework, anonymous employee reporting systems, and a third-party workplace culture review within 90 days. Derek's counsel asked if these were standard. Adrian said, "They are now." Derek signed. The press release went out at 4:15 p.m., and by 4:30, it was everywhere. Adrian Kingston's name, finally public. And beside it, Danielle Cole, Chief Strategic Advisor. Fiancé. Derek's phone rang immediately. Old colleagues. People from those dinner tables where she had once been invisible. His girlfriend called. She had seen the photograph. She didn't have much to say after Derek confirmed it was the same woman from the sidewalk. Inside Derek's company, the junior executive who had filmed on his phone the previous morning quietly deleted the video and sat at his desk reassessing everything. The senior engineer who had said she's right in front of the entire room went home and told his wife about it over dinner. Said he'd watched something in a meeting today that he wouldn't forget. Danielle never spoke publicly about the sidewalk. She didn't need to. 3 months later, Danielle and Adrian got married. Small, private, by the water. Her mother stood in the front row in a dress Danielle had bought for her and cried before anyone said a word. Her sister gave a speech that ended with, "She left a room that was making her smaller." And she walked into every room after that like she had always belonged. Because she had. Everyone stood up. Danielle laughed, a real, full laugh, and wiped her eyes and laughed again at herself for doing it. The infrastructure project broke ground 8 weeks later. Derek's team delivered on every commitment. The coastal correction was implemented exactly as Danielle had specified. Months later, in an industry profile, Derek was asked what the Kingston partnership had meant for his company. He said, "It changed how I think about leadership, about who gets credit, about what you reveal when you think no one is watching." The journalist asked if there was a specific moment he could point to. He was quiet. "Someone told me in a meeting that what you do to a person when you think they have nothing left to offer you, that is the only moment that shows what you actually are." He looked at the table. "I think about that a lot." Danielle didn't win by fighting. She didn't win by going back or planning a return or holding on to what was done to her. She won because 5 years before that boardroom, on the worst day of her life, she made one decision. She decided to keep going, to build something real, to be excellent in rooms where no one even knew she was in them yet. The mud on that sidewalk was not the beginning of her story. It was the last moment he had any power over her. And she didn't even have to say it out loud. She just walked away and kept walking, all the way to that room. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Morel Folktales and hit the notification bell. Drop a comment. What was the moment that hit you hardest? We read every single one. Until next time, stay strong, stay dignified, and remember, the version of you that keeps going quietly is building something the loudest people in the room will one day have to reckon with.